Welcome back to the Solid Verbal. Boys and girls, my name is Ty Hildenbrandt, that fine gentleman, back in his home studio in blustery Chicago, Illinois. The one, the only, still the incomparable Dan Rubenstein. Sir, welcome home. How goes it?
It's good, Ty. Thank you for welcoming me home. I had a good time in California, back in the Midwest. And look, last night, I'm thinking to myself, what are we going to do this week for the Solid Verbal? Because we can go in any number of directions, right? We have portal stuff concluding, but not fully because of Arizona, Washington, Alabama, now San Jose State, and your guy Ken Niumatalolo not running the option over there for the Spartans. You saw that, I assume.
Gonna open it up, baby. Open it up, my man.
So we've got new coaches. We've got like the final signing day coming up in a couple weeks here, which is not as exciting as usual. We've got Jim Harbaugh interviewing for jobs and whatever the fallout might come of, at the time of recording, Jim Harbaugh sort of being in between college and the pros. We've got people talking draft stuff with the NFL season kind of winding down. And so I'm like, where do we go with this week's show? And I was like, I just got to get out of the house, Ty. Got to get out of the house. So we went with the fam, and we went to one of those conveyor belt sushi places. You ever been to one of those?
A conveyor belt sushi place.
Have you heard of this at all?
I've heard of it. I've never been.
Okay. So you go to a restaurant. There's conveyor belts that sort of weave throughout the restaurant. You're like, oh, I want a couple pieces of salmon. Oh, I want some edamame. Oh, and you grab it right from the conveyor belt. Also, at this one, a robot brings you your drinks.
Oh, this is
not a joke.
This is your personal hell, isn't it?
I don't love robots. I don't love AI. I don't love any of this stuff. But the robots did play like a fun little jingle as they're bringing over your hot tea and drinks.
Okay, that personalizes the experience.
And I took this, Jody with and I suggested it. I took this as a sign from the gods to say, you know what? We have to talk movement in the sport. We got to talk pieces moving around, shuffling around the sport with the portal. And I'm not here to tell you that, a left guard from Missouri is a piece of tuna belly or something. That's not what I'm comparing. It's the movement of it all. It's the selection of it all. It's the chaos of it all, because it can be quite chaotic. So today we are doing some sort of portal dust settling as the conveyor belt is at least slowing down, if not fully slowed for most of the sport. How about that?
I appreciate that preamble. And I hope you have recovered from your automated dining experience. That is a personal hell for you. For those that don't know Dan Rubenstein as well as I do.
It was fun. Kids
I'm
liked
sure it was fun. I'm sure you also had a bit of an eye roll or a side eye when you heard you were going to a place like that.
Yeah, a little bit. And the quality's not the best. If I'm a food snob. Everybody kind of knows that about me by now. But I still had a great time, and I have a full belly, Ty. So no complaints.
Beautiful. Well, as Dan put it, we're going to be talking portal today.
Yes.
Some of the dust has settled. We've got a lot to get into. We've got opinions that we need to get off our chest. I think this is an important way to jump back into the swing of things. You were out in California last week. I had audio issues on my end. This time around, we're going to do our best to get back in the home studio, start off 2024 on the right note. If you are listening out there, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe. Don't forget to leave a star rating or review. Don't forget to at least check out verballers.com. That's our Patreon. That's where you can go and get the bonus episodes, get ad-free episodes, get access to all sorts of bonus perks, Discord, you name it. That's where all the cool verballers like to hang out, even throughout the off-season. If you're new here, I'm Ty, he's Dan. Twice a week for the foreseeable future. It's a long off-season, just sort of getting rolling. The off-season shrinks a little bit every year, right, Dan? A little bit every year. The news cycle kind of extends out. Who knows what happens with the Harbaugh thing, but at least today we reserve the episode for, I think, what is still the hot button episode, or the hot button topic, as we dive into the offseason. After all the coaching stuff, now it's back to the portal. As soon as the season ended, the portal opened. 1 million guys changed teams. I forget what the final number was. It's like 1,000, 1,300 guys who are at least in search of a different team. It's a lot. And so today we're talking quarterbacks, we're talking about coaches, we're just talking about the portal as it relates to the sport as a whole in this great wide world of college football.
Yeah, I have a number of questions here for you. I'm sure you have questions for me. Any news you want to get into? I mentioned the Ken Niumatalolo thing. Obviously, a lot of the news right now is portal related, as it has to do with Alabama players, notably the last two being Caleb Downs and Caden Proctor.
Caden Proctor went to Iowa. Also, Julian Sayin was a pretty big one.
Oh, yeah, of course. 5-star type quarterback.
The commit to Alabama has decided to go to Ohio State.
It's a huge time. And so I want to see, as the dust has settled, I just have a number of questions for you, how you feel about the portal. I think we're going to get into portal stuff big question-wise or big picture-wise after the individual questions, because that is a big topic of conversation. Like, is college football broken? Do we need guardrails? Do we need to overhaul the calendar? All these like big picture questions about the future, capital F future of the sport. I want to get into that with you as well. But I guess let's start at the top, Ty. I don't think any position is as important as quarterback. I think that's a very frozen take. What have been the notable quarterback moves to you that will actually affect how the most people watch this sport next year?
I think the Dylan Gabriel one to me,
okay,
is that's the one that I look at, because the question everybody has when you look at these quarterback moves is who's actually going to come in and be the instant impact guy that was promised, right? The white glove turnkey quarterback that you just plug and play. You know what you're going to get. He is dependable. He is reliable. You put him in the mix, he's going to elevate the entire experience. And for me, that guy is Dylan Gabriel at Oregon. Most of the other names in this discussion require a little bit of imagination, a little bit of projection. The pieces are all there at Oregon. Oregon doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. They don't need to reinvent anything. They need a capable hand is what they need. And I think Dylan Gabriel has proven in his time throughout college football, first at UCF before he got hurt, obviously most recently at Oklahoma, like he's a guy that you can put him into most systems and he's going to be pretty damn effective. So moving him up to the Pacific Northwest on an Oregon team that's already pretty loaded, I think is a really, really big deal. And for me, that's the guy that I am trained in on the most. If I'm looking at any of these quarterbacks going into 2024, transfer quarterbacks, it's Dylan Gabriel. Now, I realize this is an Oregon guy. I'm curious to get your opinion on the Oregon guy. I want you to try and not be a homer and then maybe sprinkle in a little bit of homer qualities as well. But how do we feel about the Dylan Gabriel thing? Is it as plug and play as it appears to me, maybe the untrained eye?
Yeah, I think on the surface, yes. He's had an injury history, which isn't great. If you talk to Oklahoma fans, I think he was a good source of stability, coming in with Brent Venables when there was a lot, defensively in year one, a lot left to be desired, of course. They didn't have the firepower on offense this past year as they were used to under Lincoln Riley, but at his best, he was very good. He was stable. Not Heisman quality. We saw some Oklahoma moments on offense, and I know a lot of Oklahoma fans were also quick to point at Jeff Lebby and his play calling in those tight games. Look at the Kansas game. But I think with what Oregon looks like right now, with what they return on the offensive line, what they return in the backfield, what they return and have added at tight end and receiver, that he is set up incredibly well. I think I say he and maybe Will Howard are the sort of white glove guys. I don't think Ohio State quite has the offensive line, though they've addressed it in the portal. And certainly with what they've added this recruiting class with the number one overall recruit in Jeremiah Smith, the receiver, that Will Howard will have certainly a higher level of talent around him than he did this past year at Kansas State. And that was sort of the knock on him. He kind of went as his skill talent went at Kansas State. So 2 years ago, Deuce Vaughn, Malik Knowles, those guys, he sort of rose with them, and then this past year sort of struggled as the offensive line was a little more inconsistent and his weapons were more inconsistent. And with how much Ohio State seems to be going all in on this season in a new look Big Ten with a now defending national champion rival, and with the number of guys choosing to return at Ohio State, the Will Howard chip is about as fascinating to me as Dylan Gabriel, just because there is a sense that Ryan Day is sort of up against a wall right now and fighting for his legacy, his reputation, his long-term security at Ohio State. And Will Howard has recently led a team to a New Year's Six game, a Big 12 championship. And so at his best, Will Howard can be a very good player. It's can sort of reshuffled. I saw Ohio State just parted ways with their quarterbacks coach, so they're reshuffling things on offense. the pressure, the pressure cooker that exists right now in Columbus, I think is more pronounced than what exists in Eugene right now, because there's just always going to be those expectations to compete for national championships year in and year out. So that to me is maybe a little bit more interesting, but no, I think around the sport, there's a lot of fascinating court, like even just like Malik Murphy at Duke, DJU at Florida State. Like these are big names from big programs going to big or medium-sized programs. Like year over year, there are always just going to be more names. And, Dante Moore to Oregon as well in the portal at quarterback that are not just like, oh, it didn't work out for him here. It's, a guy who was pretty good or a guy who was full on good, but circumstances change or the relationship with the head coach changes. Kyle McCord at Syracuse, right? He's not one of the best Ohio State quarterbacks we've seen recently, but the floor seems to be pretty high.
The floor, the floor is high. My concern with Will Howard, and why I disagree that he is the turnkey white glove plug-and-play
I don't think
guy.
he is on that level, but continue.
No, he's definitely not, because first off, he's a big kid. I didn't realize Will Howard was 6'5", 240. He's a big dude. And when he gets moving, he can knock guys over. So I like that. I think putting him in this offense, putting almost anybody who's capable in this offense, they're going to be somewhat productive. But again, maybe capped a little bit by the talent around him, but threw the ball a little bit more than Kyle McCord this season by a handful of attempts, had a lower completion percentage, more interceptions. I'm just like, I look at Will Howard, I look at that Ohio State offense, and I've told you this before. I think what Ohio State needs on offense is a really accurate passer. A really accurate passer to distribute the ball to those weapons out wide, to hand the ball off to whoever's in the backfield now. They're loaded in the backfield as well. That's what I think they need. I don't know if Will Howard is that guy. Maybe he will improve with better talent around him, but I don't look at Will Howard and say this is a pinpoint passer. I say this is a bowling ball with eyes if he wants to run the ball, and they will probably incorporate, and Bill O'Brien is now the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Maybe they will find ways to incorporate his skill set into the offense. It may not look exactly like it looked over the years with CJ Stroud or whoever as the trigger man. Things are allowed to change, and that might be for the better for Ohio State. But at least the version of the Ohio State offense that I think we've come to know over the last few seasons, I don't know if Will Howard quite fits that profile. So that, for me, I like Will Howard as a player. That, for me, is my point of hesitation with this decision to go to Ohio State.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing to me is, who's he handing the ball off to? Trey Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Who's he throwing the ball to? All these five-star receivers. Now, the herd has been thinned a little bit via the portal and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. declaring. But the fascinating thing is, I don't think he's going to have to do a ton, right? I think you're right. It's going to be an accuracy thing for him. It's just going to be, is Will Howard on time with his throws? It's going to be like a prompt Will Howard. And that to me is interesting, especially you look at the schedule for Ohio State. This is not a preview episode, but September is clean. They've got a meaty middle with, I think I just looked before we recorded, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, Nebraska defenses right there in the middle. So got to grow up quickly within that offense. We'll see what kind of fingerprints Ryan Day still does or doesn't have on this offense. But with those running backs, you would assume that there was going to be, for sure, a bigger emphasis on the rushing attack, and then the threat of play action should be that much more robust. I think Dylan Gabriel has more white glove because of the sort of pressure that's not on Dan Lanning, that is on Ryan Day. But I think in terms of narrative, Will Howard is more fascinating right now.
Will Howard's definitely more fascinating. Another one, if we're talking about guys that I think you can just sort of snap them into place and are interesting, I think KJ Jefferson is a really interesting transfer.
Talk to me.
I think KJ Jefferson is going to a system with UCF where at a minimum he is an upgrade over what they've had. At a minimum, we know Gus Malzahn has had success with these types of quarterbacks before, guys who are true dual threats. And I feel like in a conference that is wide open, truly the Big 12 or Big 18, however many teams we got in this thing now, it feels wide open to me. New teams coming in, old powers leaving. I'm not here to say UCF is winning the Big 12 next season, but I think KJ Jefferson was dying for a change of scenery. He needed to get out of Arkansas. It was at the point where it was just like everything was on him. That's not to say it won't be at least somewhat on him at UCF, but I feel like he's at least going into an offense now led by a guy who's been there and done that with this style of player. And I'm just really curious to see what he does. Like I said, at a minimum, it's an upgrade. Probably not a Heisman caliber season. Probably not an NFL first round caliber season. I don't mean that, but in terms of a guy coming in and fitting right away and making a difference, I think KJ has the opportunity to do that.
No, and it's been a big deal that UCF has run the ball as well as they have, that the offensive line there has developed in the way that they have, because if you look at when KJ Jefferson did succeed, it's when you have that more complete offense, like any quarterback really succeeds. So yeah, maybe that's not fully seducing you, Ty, but it's winking at you from across the bar.
It's winking at me from across the bar, and I mentioned a word that maybe we can unpack a little bit more.
Sure.
Talking about KJ. Opportunity. So there's a difference in this conversation between a guy who you look at and you say they're plug and play. It's a difference maker. We know it's going to happen, or it's either really going to happen or really not going to happen, versus a guy who I think creates the opportunity to move something forward, right? So if Dylan Gabriel is plug and play, I think of somebody like a Malik Murphy.
Yep.
I think of somebody like a Riley Leonard.
Sure.
Might be an
DeQuan
example.
Finn, Jake Spavital, Baylor. Come on.
I'm thinking of some other names that maybe are in an echelon below, where it's not clear to me if it's going to be plug and play right away, but you at least see the setting around these transfers and you say, that's a guy who has a unique opportunity, again, to take his new team to a place that that fans have been screaming for it to go for eons, right?
Agree.
Malik Murphy, Riley Leonard, I can explain why I think those guys fall into this camp. What are the names for you that jump out when we think of new transfers, quarterbacks who step into a role, they have an opportunity to maybe make more of it than would meet the eye?
Okay, so Jade Mayava is going to USC to compete with Miller Moss for that job. It's been a very quarterback-friendly system. It's wild that it's a battle between USC's longtime backup and UNLV's sort of surprise pseudo-star, who faded a little bit in the bigger games near the end of the year, but he was not seen coming out of high school to be of USC quality. That to me is super interesting. Aiden Childs has opportunity. This is his team at Michigan State, right? There's a lot of unknown and a lot of big names. He was too good to keep off the field last year at Oregon State. Brock Vandegrift, opportunity at Kentucky, right? And Kentucky is another one of those teams that's sort of, I don't think they're pushing all their chips in, but they seem to be more and more aggressive. They were aggressive going after a quarterback transfer last year that didn't fully work out, and Devin Leary consistently as being like a game changer in that offense, but it's opportunity, Ty. Right. We thought it would be Will Rogers going to a Kalen DeBoer system at Washington. He still may end up being the quarterback for Jed Fish in Washington. I think he re-entered the portal, but it's opportunity. There's guys who are hoping to have like a Bo Nix type effect of like, you know what? I need a fresh start, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, whether it's Tyler Van Dyke in Madison, Wisconsin. Like all of these things, and maybe it's just January Dan speaking. Shout out January, I guess. Maybe it's just that. But like, I'm pretty sure it's not going to work out for Tyler Van Dyke in Wisconsin. I think he had a special time a couple of years ago, and I think it's just, time has come to an end.
You're getting a little bit over your skis here.
Okay.
We're gonna have I want to have the conversation next about wild card quarterbacks who, and maybe I'm giving away my hand a bit. Wild card quarterbacks who could be boom or bust. I think TBD falls.
TBD squarely falls. Continue.
Yeah, falls into that category. So when I think of opportunity, I think of guys like I mentioned Malik Murphy. Super interesting to me. I have no idea why he picked Duke. I really don't. I'm fascinated to see what he does at Duke because he is a huge, hulking quarterback prospect who I think showed obvious flashes at Texas. So I'm real curious to see what he looks like anywhere. Duke, I don't need to understand it to be interested in it. Cam Ward. So when we last left Cameron Ward entered the NFL draft, transferred, entered into the portal, decided instead of going to the portal, he's going to go to the NFL from Wazoo. Has since decided he's going back to college and has gone to Miami. Cam Ward's a really interesting prospect. he may be able to drag Miami into some better state of offense. I don't know. I don't have a ton of optimism around that because I feel like we've seen this a couple times now with the Mario Cristobal system, and it just never seems like it fully works out at the quarterback spot, but maybe this will be different. But Cam Ward certainly has that opportunity to maybe make that offense a little bit more vertical, give it some explosion. I mean, that's really what they've been lacking. I do think my answer here, and I admit, homer pick, I think my answer for the quarterback was the biggest opportunity to take his team to a different place or a place that it needs to go is probably Riley Leonard.
Okay.
And I'm not crazy about the Riley Leonard thing as a Notre Dame fan. I'm very mixed on Riley Leonard. You read some articles, they express some skepticism about, not about him as an athlete, about him as a passer, about him as a pro prospect. There's a fair amount of conjecture out there that Riley Leonard is not as good as advertised. Then there are other people who almost say the exact opposite. He's a first-round talent.
Who are these people? Name names, Ty.
Friends of the show. I'm not naming names.
Oh.
Friends of the show. Friends of the show. People who write, people who talk. There is a spectrum of folks on Riley Leonard, and I'm kind of in the middle. I want to be skeptical. At the same time, I want to be hopeful. I do think, though, it is fairly obvious that over the last, 5-6 years, maybe with the exception of the 2021 season where Notre Dame had Jack Cohn, with that rare exception, Notre Dame's basically run a system that I think would work better with a mobile quarterback. And they just haven't had a true mobile guy. They've had guys who could run. Ian Book could run if you had to. If his one read broke down, he'd run. Drew Pine could run. He could get hurt, but he could also run to a formidable degree to at least keep things going. But they haven't had a guy like Riley Leonard, that caliber athlete at quarterback. And I think now with rehiring Mike Denbrock, pulling him away from LSU, it's clear that they're going to go more in that direction. And this is, the last stint with Notre Dame maybe didn't work out, but this time around, given his work with Jaden Daniels, I think he's grown as a play caller. And I would expect that the system that they put in place is going to be one that recognizes a quarterback with a lot of athleticism in Riley Leonard.
Yeah, I think with the question with Riley Leonard is Mike Denbrock able to adjust his offense to not having Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas type big-bodied receivers destroying dudes all over the place. I don't know what Notre Dame's receiving core looks like. I know they lost a few young guys, right, in the portal.
They lost a ton in the portal. They brought guys in via the portal as well.
Bo Collins was one of them. I know that. Yeah.
They brought him up from Clemson. Yeah, I mean, they have gone out and they have brought guys in with real receiving experience to try and plug that gap. It's a big gap on this offense. They know it. They knew it. Right. And they, I think, went out and tried to address it as best they could. I'm still pretty high on Jaden Greathouse. Maybe he has a new lease on things. I mean, got some work. He wasn't an apparition like some of his teammates were in the receiving corps. Jaden Greathouse, I think, showed a lot of promise this season. So adding to some of the other names that are already there, I think they'll be okay. But it's a fair point. Like, what does it look like if you don't have pro caliber receivers out wide?
I like it. I like the Riley Leonard thing. I like that he's a gamer. I like that he's athletic. I like that he has big conference experience. Say what you will about the ACC, but he has big conference experience. And I think emotionally he will be. I think, Sam Hartman was a great pull last year, but I think emotionally Riley Leonard will be great for Notre Dame. I don't know what that ends up looking like in the win-loss column, but I think he is going to become some kind of folk hero, for better or worse, or maybe it's game to game, something like that. I don't think it's a huge risk. I think you kind of understand what you're getting in Riley Leonard, and I think it's going to be more on offensive line, receiver. They'll be fine at running back. They always seem to be. And Mike Denbrock saying, okay, this is my understanding of what we have. This is what our offense can be. I'm not going to try to make it LSU's offense or make it Cincinnati's offense or whatever. This is how I envision things based on what we have, not based on what we don't. And I think they're going to be in a good place. I really do.
The other thing that works to his advantage is the schedule is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful next season. There are 4 games on here, and again, this is not a preview episode. There are 4 games on this thing that jump out to you. They open up week 1 on the road at A&M, which is a huge spot opening weekend. However, who knows what state A&M is going to be in? That's a brand new circumstance given all the turmoil they've had down there. New coach, a lot of transfers. We can talk about that a little bit later on. They've got Louisville at home. Okay, Louisville should be decent again, but Louisville's got some turnover. Florida State's got a ton of turnover. That game isn't until November. And USC, they're on the road to close out the season at USC. But again, fair amount of turnover, certainly new quarterback situation at USC. Who knows what state that team's going to be in. The rest of these games, I'm not looking at a whole lot of the other games on this schedule and saying to myself, this is a team that's going to knock them out of the playoff. There shouldn't be more than 3 losses on this thing, worst case scenario. So as long as Riley Leonard doesn't get hurt, as long as they're able to find a way to kind of tame any inaccuracy that might exist in his passing game, Notre Dame's in a really good spot. And we'll see what Denbrock can do with them. I agree. The receiving core was a question coming into this season, still a question in 2024. However, the opportunity is there, right? Given the offense that I know Denbrock wants to run and what it feels like Notre Dame has wanted to run, but just hasn't really done a great job of it the last few seasons. Who to you that I have not mentioned speaks to the word opportunity?
Oh, Cam Ward to me. I mean, I'll go back to Cam Ward just because you look at some of the recent quarterbacks that Mario Cristobal, but be it at Oregon, be it at Miami, it's a lot of big-bodied, big throwers, whether it's TVD, whether it's Justin Herbert, even like the Tyler Shuck, Anthony Brown end of his Oregon time. Like, they weren't improvisers in the same way that I think Cam Ward is. Buying time, making plays with his feet, taking shots downfield. Like, I think on any given play, there are 3 to 5 incredible things that could happen and 3 to 5 disastrous things that could happen within the Cam Ward experience. The floor has been pretty low at quarterback recently for Miami, be it because of injury, be it because of youth and inexperience. Cam Ward brings experience, maturity. I don't think he's going to be phased. He's played in big games in big stadiums. We saw him in the Apple Cup last year. We saw him in Autzen Stadium last year have probably the best game of his year against the best defense he faced. So if Miami is still wild on offense, if they're still not at all dependable, I don't think it's going to be fully on Cam Ward, because I think his experience, his maturity, like if the system is good, I know they lose Colby Young, one of their big playmakers at receiver, transfers to, I believe, Georgia. So that hurts, but they've recruited well enough. The offensive line has gotten to a mostly very strong place, which is not spot. Anything he's, I think, been used to at Washington State. They've had like individual guys, but as a unit, I think Miami's going to they should do a good job protecting him. And so I think their ceiling becomes interesting. I think he became a little bit overrated when we were talking about portal quarterbacks and the money being rumored to be being thrown around for Cam Ward, and he's measuring the NFL against, Florida State or Miami or maybe Ohio State interest or Oregon, any of these schools. Like, that Cam Ward is good, but I don't know. There was a little bit of brake pumping for me with Cam Ward, and I think he decided to come back because maybe his NFL grade didn't come back as impressive as he would have hoped. But what I think he adds to Miami he's generally must watch, but I think they become super intriguing with a quarterback talent like the best of Cam Ward can be. The best of him.
Yeah, you've watched a lot of Mario Cristobal football.
Sure.
Is there a concern that he will take the best aspects of Cam Ward and bury them and make them worse or make them less part of his game? Because I feel like that's a conversation we've had before with Cristobal.
Sure.
And I'm not saying this to dunk on him. I think he's by and large done a pretty good job on the recruiting trail. Obviously has to take that and turn it into wins and losses. They don't want to go 7-5 next season. But does that concern you?
Sure. It should concern anybody that cares for Miami football. I'm not a Miami fan, but yeah, that you've seen his past. Now, I don't think that Miami and Mario Cristobal necessarily like ruined TVD. I think he's always had some of the tendencies that have had a bigger spotlight since he played for Manny Diaz. Just that he's sort of going to go downfield and we'll see what happens. He's going to try to improvise, but as he got hurt, his ability to make those throws suffered, but he still sort of believed in himself physically and tried to make those throws. And, we saw like game-sealing interceptions. We saw those kinds of things. I still think I don't think that's on Mario Cristobal per se. it's development, it's communication, it's knowing when to throw it away, that kind of thing. But yeah, it has consistently not been the most quarterback friendly. A Mario Cristobal team has not been the most quarterback friendly team to play for. But I think Cam Ward offers something that, I mean, you can go back to like the year that Derek King spent at Miami. Something that becomes more intriguing, that you can move the ball with the quarterback in more ways than Miami's been able to do recently. So I think, again, at his best, because he will throw a clunker or three into the season, at his best, Cam Ward offers something exciting for Miami. And so that to me will have me watching more Miami than usual.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the regular season, I'll just use the SP Plus here just as a general measurement. Miami was 100th in offensive SP Plus at the end of Cristobal's first season.
Yep. Dealing with injuries. Yep.
Made a bunch of changes in the offseason, was dealing with injuries. The line, as you said, was very, very good this season. Up 68 spots in the SP Plus, 32nd.
Great.
Overall offense. There are things that they can sort out there. I mentioned some of them earlier, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of pop Cam Ward brings to bear. Any other names here that you think are interesting from an opportunity standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, again, I mentioned DeQuan Finn. Yeah.
DeQuan Finn. I want to talk about him next. I actually want to talk about TVD next because I kind of have a different take on both those guys. But again, we're talking in terms of opportunity. Guys that you look at and you say, all right, you understand why they went there to some extent. But if this works out, this has a real chance to take this offense to a whole other level. I think of DeQuan Finn. I think of TVD almost in the same camp. And that's probably not fair to DeQuan Finn because he's been nothing but awesome in his time in Toledo. Legitimately fun to watch. Going to Baylor, I have next to no idea what to expect from him at Baylor, running a Jake Spavital system. And I like DeQuan Finn, but I am pretty much out of optimism when it comes to Dave Aranda's ability to bring in a quarterback, to home grow a quarterback, and turn that guy into a playmaker. I feel like we've gotten flashes with Jake. I feel like we've gotten flashes with Blake Shapen.
Sure.
But in terms of like a consistent thing that you can build around and project forward into the coming season, to me, this is a boomer bust type of setup. He's a wild card, DeQuan Finn, and it's not because DeQuan Finn isn't good. It's because the system that he's heading into, you could like almost totally see a scenario in which like, it kind of doesn't work out. Now they're starting somebody else in October.
Yeah, wild card is an upgrade for Baylor, so I'm fine with it.
True.
From where they were with Sawyer Robertson and Blake Shapen this year, wild card means there's a chance. Yeah. There's a chance, there's a spark. Jake Spavital brought that offensive spark to Cal last year, which desperately needed it. And I'm not super high on the short, medium, and long-term future of Baylor football, but in terms of entertainment factor, I think Baylor's offense becomes a lot more entertaining with DeQuan Finn. Doesn't mean they're winning the Big 12. Doesn't mean they're even going to a bowl game. They'll probably become closer to going to a bowl game if they don't. But they needed something. They absolutely needed something, and I like that they went aggressive. I like that they're taking a swing with a MAC quarterback, which doesn't necessarily, and I think Indiana's doing the same thing with Curtis Rourke, but I like that they're taking a swing because otherwise Dave Aranda's just getting fired after the year or during the year. So you got to do something, and they're trying. And so I can appreciate that because DeQuan Finn can move, can make plays, and is experienced and old enough that he's earned this kind of opportunity.
Yeah, I like DeQuan Finn a lot as a player. I think I'm more skeptical of the situation. Which brings me to TVD.
Okay.
So we've been beating around the bush here a little bit with him and has been at Miami the entirety of his college career. He's transferring to Wisconsin now to play quarterback for Luke Fickell. If we're talking about wild cards, guys who are boom or bust, I think TVD is the easy answer.
Okay.
And I say that because we've already seen both versions of him, right? Like we saw the promise of TVD early on in his career, And then we've seen the injury-riddled, inconsistent, interception-throwing version of TVD the last 2 seasons. And I don't know what to expect this coming season at Wisconsin. I think we've been conditioned now to expect the worst and expect the interceptions. I forget what the final I know he had 12 interceptions on the year.
Right.
But for a while there, he went like 4 or 5 games throwing a pick in every game. It wasn't the good kind of streak that you want to talk about.
Definitely not.
But I wonder if he is in a different setup, change of scenery, if that makes him have a bit of a renaissance. So he's the guy to me I look at and I say, I could really see this working out because we've already seen the good version of him way back when. I can also see him being benched, going them directly in a completely different direction by the time we get to like week 5.
Right. Okay. First of all, who's he throwing to at Wisconsin? Like, Wisconsin hasn't been crazy aggressive with receivers, which is the one position where there are just numbers in the portal. And Phil Longo can point to his recent development of receivers, big offenses, quarterbacks throwing the ball downfield, running the ball to set up big play action to receivers, using RPO stuff. Will Pauling was good last year, but like in an offense that didn't throw the ball downfield that much, I think it was a lot of underneath stuff to him. And so if TVD's strength is his confidence in going downfield, who's going downfield for Wisconsin against a more difficult schedule in the Big Ten? I don't have the schedule in front of me. Maybe you can pull it up. But like,
sure.
In terms of where Wisconsin is, if the identity isn't with that same sort of power rushing, which, you know, Braylon Allen was still very good last year when healthy, when they were focused on that element of the offense, but it wasn't where it's been. Quarterback was a nightmare at times last year for Wisconsin and just completing a pass on 3rd and 7. So where is this offense coming from? Where is the system? Where are the receivers who are going to make Michigan DBs or Oregon DBs who are winning these 50-50 battles? Or like, where is the fearlessness from a personnel standpoint from this Wisconsin offense coming from? That to me is like, I don't think he's set up for success in Madison. Happy to be wrong, but it doesn't seem like a great opportunity to me.
I mean, there are some decent defenses on this schedule.
Okay.
Next season. I mean, say you want about Alabama week 3, but Alabama's still going to be a top 10 at worst caliber football team.
You think so?
With Kalen DeBoer.
You think so?
Maybe by the time all is said and done, maybe not to start out.
I don't know. Okay.
Lost a lot of talent, but there's still a lot of talent on that roster. Week 3, home against Bama. After a bye, they're at USC.
Got to get better. At some point, USC's defense is going to get better. It's going to get better.
Has to. Purdue, at Rutgers, at Northwestern, home against Penn State, at Iowa, another bye week, then close out the season, final 3 games, home against Oregon, at Nebraska, home against Minnesota for Paul Bunyan's Axe. That is not a schedule I look at and I say that's a cakewalk. There are a lot of tough defenses in there.
No Michigan. I mentioned Michigan
not
DBs.
Tough defenses as well, but yeah, no Michigan, no Ohio State.
Get Penn State
it's
at
workable.
home.
It's workable, but some tough road trips in there. I think an opportunity, but also an opportunity for a bust.
Yeah, it could be 5 tough defenses to end the season, and I think Luke Fickell has an increased amount of pressure, even though he was able to pull out some weird losable games near the end of the year for Wisconsin. I think there's added pressure. I think there's rightfully an expectation at Wisconsin, like you should be competing to win 10 games a year in Madison, right? This shouldn't be. This is a program in which most, if not everybody, wins, and so there's a reason for that. Wisconsin has developed a really strong winning football culture over the years, and even if it faded and recruiting faded under Paul Chryst, this is a place that sort of creates winning football. And so I think the expectations are going to continue to grow, and there's going to be increased frustration if they don't with Luke Fickell, because this is the time in which we live. And Wisconsin certainly doesn't want to be left behind as the Big Ten becomes more crowded. And so I'm not super high on TVD at this point in his career when you have to like go back 3 years to point to the good. It's tough for me, but I also root for a team that you kind of had to go back a few years, if ever, to see where Bo Nix was going to be promising at Oregon. But
Yeah, true.
I don't think it's apples to apples. And you add in like the recent injury history with TVD. I don't know. I hope for his sake he is sort of reborn in Madison, and Bucky Badger roaming the sideline and the cheese curds and the raucous crowd in Camp Randall is something that is going to be new to him because he really hasn't played in front of a raucous home crowd. I had to take the shot, Ty. I had to. I come
It's
this
fair.
long with this much
It's
Miami
fair.
talk.
It's fair.
And he's mentioned that he appreciates playing on the road because the raucous crowd didn't exist in Coral Gables. So maybe that is something that really gets him juiced, and he's just a gamer and it works out for him. But curious to see how it works out with how Wisconsin's currently constructed. That's all.
Do you have another boom or bust candidate?
Yeah, I mean, like Aiden Childs is super fascinating to me. I think his ceiling is pretty great, but I think it's just going to take time at Michigan State. I think because of the line, because of where the receiver position is. But quarterbacks tend to succeed under Jonathan Smith. You go back to his time at Washington, you go to his time where no-name guys succeeded at Oregon State, let alone like DJU taking a nice, solid, stable step forward this year. I just think Jonathan Smith offenses are where quarterbacks thrive, that he makes it understandable, that the way the offenses shift and move around, it creates easier throws than most systems open up. And so Aiden Childs, I think, is eventually going to boom. I think it'll probably be in 2025 as Michigan State seems to be a place that will continue to be aggressive in the portal. And he should be able to recruit reasonably well and got some guys in from Oregon State. I just think year one's, it's a big ask right now. So maybe there's like a random week 7 boom for
Right.
Aiden Childs. And I think his ceiling and potential is going to be obvious, but I'm going to sort of delay the boom for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jonathan Smith has proven nothing if not the fact that he can have a stabilizing effect on a program. And if you're a Michigan State fan, you'll sign up for that in a heartbeat.
Sure.
Because, I mean, former coach left under obviously controversial circumstances. It's been a minute since it felt like that program was on stable footing. And so you'll take that even if it takes a little bit to get there.
Has it been a decade since they've had an offense that's been interesting and fun?
Dude.
Since like 2014
It's been a long time. Since it
playoff
felt,
run?
I mean, unless you want to go back a couple years to when they knocked off Michigan, right? If you want to talk Peyton Thorne.
But those offenses weren't consistently anything.
They were at least entertaining. But to say that they were consistently anything, I mean, they hit it with Kenneth Walker.
Yeah.
Kenny Walker was sort of the end-all, be-all, and that was what powered that offense. But to say that it was consistent across the board that season would be a mischaracterization at best.
131st this year in points per drive. 72nd in 2022. With Kenneth Walker, 41. And
Right.
more and more, he just seems... Even that 2020 Michigan win year, they finished 120th offensive points per drive. 2014 was a high, and it's been downhill since 2014. Top 40 in 2015. 2016... I'm just reading numbers at this point. It's super entertaining type. People love this stuff. 82. And it's just sort of been downhill from there at the end of the D'Antonio time into Mel Tucker and now Jonathan Smith. So I don't know. I think it's a Jimmy's and Joe's issue in this moment. And I think it'll get resolved in the next like 18 months.
So why don't we do this? Because honestly, this conversation ran a lot longer
Yeah.
than I think we both expected. We intended to get into coaches and their approach to the portal. We also wanted to talk about some bigger picture portal stuff that I know drives a conversation. Why don't we talk a little bit more about quarterback rooms and quarterback battles that are of interest to us? And maybe on the next episode, we could bump and talk more about the coaching and some of the bigger picture portal things. I don't really want to cut this part short, and I also don't want to have an hour and 30-minute conversation for people to digest here.
Is this where we talk Steve Angeli? Is this the part of the show?
I'm not talking Steve Angeli as part of
You
this.
don't find that fascinating?
No.
Mr. Sunbowl himself?
No. You think he's beating Riley Leonard? Absolutely not. He looked really good in the Sun Bowl.
It's January 22nd. You heard it here first, Ty.
No. I'm not into Angeli. I'm not ready for
Angeli's
Angeli.
job to lose.
No.
Okay.
No. I'm not going there. Quarterback rooms, okay?
Yeah.
So all of this quarterback movement makes the quarterback room discussion very interesting in some cases. Maybe not as much at Notre Dame, regardless of your opinion.
Lloyd
of
Carr's grandson? You going to mix it up this year?
Don't think so.
Okay.
Don't think so. But as you look around college football, new coaches, new transfers, which are the situations that you look at a quarterback room and you're like, huh, that's interesting. That's something I didn't expect that I'd be saying at this point in January.
How about Arch Manning sitting for 2 years as the number 1 overall recruit? That was like there's been rumors about him moving around the sport, maybe Alabama interest, but certainly different with Nick Saban retiring. That's an interesting room, even though I don't think there's competition for the starting job. But we saw Malik Murphy sort of see the writing on the wall once Quinn Ewers announced he was coming back, and he made his move before the playoff. That room is fascinating. USC's room is fascinating.
The USC one, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I mean, is USC going to roll with Jaden Meava? Are they going to roll with Miller Moss?
I think so. I mean, they could potentially wait for something to happen after the spring window or after spring practice and somebody loses a job and USC pounces, but then you're getting somebody that didn't have like spring installation.
Could they go get Arch Manning?
I don't know, man. If you're Arch Manning, you probably just, if you're not leaving now, leaving after spring and not having spring practice and just sort of being rushed into a starting job, I don't think that's a terribly wise decision. I suppose we'll see. Michigan post J.J. McCarthy is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Ohio State, if Will Howard doesn't work out, is super interesting to me because he's not a sure thing, as you pointed out, that he's a big body, but took a step back this year. In terms of rooms specifically, like quarterback battles, tell me.
Alabama.
Sure. Austin Mack? Jalen Milroe?
Alabama is really interesting to me because Jalen Milroe, I think, started off on rocky footing, but finished in a really intriguing way. And at least in the universe we were previously in, building forward into 2024, it's like, okay, they cracked the code on Jalen Milroe. They know how to use him. They used his legs to their advantage. They used that combination of the power rushing with the vertical passing to great effect. They beat Georgia, in part because of it. Obviously didn't win the national championship, but I think all things considered a pretty good season for Jalen Milroe. It ended up that way. He came a long way. He does require a specific system, though, and I think that specific system to really be effective. That system is not the Kalen DeBoer system.
Right.
The Kalen DeBoer system is like a pro-style-y version of the air raid. And that's kind of what it is. And I just don't think that's his game. And so whether it's a guy that they bring in, whether it's an Austin Mack who transferred down from Washington, maybe is it Will Rogers? Will Rogers, who is, as you said earlier, back in the portal now looking for where he might go next. I know he was visiting in Tuscaloosa. Maybe he's somebody who could end up committing to Alabama. That quarterback room's really interesting. It would really be a story in these parts if Jalen Milroe is not the starting quarterback at Alabama this coming season. Maybe if he's looking for a different team because of a new system, because of other guys coming in. That's the one I think to me that I'm most interested in. The USC thing is puzzling, and I'm surprised they haven't gotten somebody. No disrespect to Jaden Meava or Miller Moss. I'm surprised they haven't gotten a bigger name to run that system because Lincoln Riley's got that track record. That's more of the puzzling to me. This is more of the fascinating at Alabama because I don't think there's a good fit with that offense for Jalen Milroe. Just doesn't seem like it's what Kalen DeBoer wants to do or what he's comfortable doing.
I'm curious to see if Alex Orji can throw for Michigan. I mean, it'll be Alex Orji against Jaden Davis, the true freshman, came in with, I think he's from the Charlotte area, came in with a lot of acclaim, and who's coaching that team, what that system looks like, if Jim Harbaugh's moving on, if and when. That's fascinating to me. Defending champs. The quarterback room at Nebraska. Is it day one Dylan Raiola? Is that just...
It's got to be. It's got to be, man. Gotta be.
Okay. I assume so too, but that's a lot. That's a lot with the expectations there, with the expectations nationally being, that top flight type quarterback at a 5-star. Played at a bunch of different high schools. Just we'll see if Nebraska offers the stability that he's hoping for. That'll be wild to watch. There is so much wide open in this sport this year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I think that maybe we could use to talk about, topics on our next episode. But because of the coaching movement, because of all of the transfers, the player movement, because of the system expanding, because of Saban retiring, let's be real, that plays a factor as well. Yeah. Because of all of these changing dynamics, it truly feels more wide open in 24 than I can remember in like a decade. I mean, it really feels like it is just out there. And that is going to drive some teams crazy. That is going to drive some fan bases crazy. But I think it's going to make for whatever you think of the playoff, whatever you think of the New World Order with conference realignment and all that, all of these factors together are going to combine for, I hope, a season that feels really wide open. And that'll be entertaining, if nothing more.
Has the conversation around Nick Saban, you did not even come close to alluding to this, but the way you talked about like there being a power vacuum leading to chaos, I picked up on some very low frequency Saddam Hussein vibes. I picked up on some very, like, the way he was able to keep that was not your intention. No. And I don't want to go to a place where we're discussing SEC football like there are Middle East factions involved.
Right.
But that, I think, was the low frequency that I picked up with your illusion. Not necessarily your intention.
No.
But that's what I picked up on. No, you're absolutely right. You're like the potential for continued chaos. And look, I think, and we can talk about this on part 2 of this episode, that like the currency isn't going to be who has the best $10 million coach. The currency isn't going to be who is stringing together top 5 recruiting classes. The currency is going to be stability, right? Stability that attracts others to leave chaos and enter into stability, and stability when players see what they have currently and then look at the rest of the sport and say to themselves, grass definitely doesn't seem greener over there. Like, it's kind of different over here, whatever that place is. If that's Georgia, if that's Stanford, whatever the place, that like, that seems more than ever that like, I've got a job, I'm developing, my coach is being upfront with me, I'm getting playing time that I was promised or that I feel like I've earned by completing the various, benchmarks that the coach has laid out for me. Like, that feels like it's the new, if teams are rich in returning players, that feels like it's going to make an enormous difference in the sport moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good place to leave it because we've got a lot to talk about on that front, whether it's Mike Elko losing 23 name brand guys and bringing in 23 more to kind of fill in the gaps, whether it's what Ryan Day and Ohio State are doing, whether it's what your boy Dan Lanning is doing at Oregon, or other guys, Deion Sanders. We haven't even mentioned Coach Prime. We could talk about him in the next episode, or also a guy like a Jeff Brom, who has been super aggressive at Louisville in the portal. Even Kurt Signetti, who you mentioned as well. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that we can play that conversation, but next episode, we'll talk about how some coaches have approached the portal and which we think are doing a winning job, which we think are doing more of a puzzling job.
Which are just panicked, right?
Yeah,
and
who's just panicking.
They're showing up to the grocery store with the ice storm approaching. Like, I don't even like wheat bread, but it's all they have. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, solveverbal@gmail.com is always the email address. You can hit us up on social media as well.
Yes.
It's a long off season, but we got to peel back the onion on the portal whenever we can. And that's not to say it's done yet. It might not be done for a while, depending on what goes down with Harbaugh. That kicks off a new 30-day window. Yeah. At time of recording, we're recording this on Monday afternoon. It at least sounds like there are more meetings planned between Harbaugh and the Chargers. That is something we're going to have to pay pretty close attention to over the next few weeks. It is expected by many in our world that he will take that, but it is certainly not a given. And we know Michigan wants him back to start a repeat bid going into 2024. So stay tuned on that front.
Yes.
Dove into the quarterback side of the portal on this episode. Next episode, more to come on coaches.
More to come on
just like bigger picture stuff, honestly, as well. Like, there is still a raging debate out on social media all across the college football media space with respect to the portal. And I saw an article published earlier today that called it a shit show, especially when layered in with NIL. There's just a lot to unpack and figure out. And I'm just, I'm curious to get your take on how we can make this thing better, if we can make this thing better.
A lot of Alabama fans with some very new principled thoughts.
A lot of Alabama fans.
Not like this, guys. Not like this isn't. We don't want it like this, guys. A lot of that happening. Can I finish with one other thing, Ty?
Please.
Okay, here's my announcement. We're done talking college football. If you came here for the college football, we gave you, 56 and a half minutes or so? That's pretty good. 55 minutes? I don't know what this is going to clock in at after you edit out the Saddam Hussein comment. Are you going to edit that out, Ty?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
We'll leave that in.
I almost wish you would, so people are going to just hear that part and be like, what were they talking about with Saddam Hussein? And maybe that just goes out into when we release this show on vinyl only.
Right.
We're done talking college football. So if you came here, thank you for your download. Thank you for your support. Perhaps the greatest recruiting job of all in this early offseason, Ty.
Here it is. Go ahead.
I recruited you to the dark arts of pizza making.
You did.
You've now made 4 pizzas?
I made 4. Well, no, I made 3 pizzas, and I ruined one of them.
Did you toss the one you ruined? You didn't even...
No, I mean, we ate the parts of it that were salvageable or edible.
Yeah.
I mean, you could eat it. You could eat it raw if you wanted, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot to stop the stone from spinning before I launched it.
Yeah.
And it's hard enough on a stationary stone, but launching it onto one that's moving was no bueno.
So what did the end result of that pie look like?
I mean, I can show you what the pizza stone looks like. It looks like a blackened mess.
Yeah.
But
Looks
it
like a
tasted
Jackson
okay.
Pollock, yeah.
I mean, we ate the scraps from it. It
Great.
didn't have any shape, but it tasted all right. Yeah, so Dan came here. When did we do that? First week of January? You came to town. We recorded at Lehigh and Yakko's and all the cool spots around here. And you pretty much put like the hard sell. Like you were almost literally Jim Harbaugh sleeping at Quinn Nordin's house.
That's true.
Recruiting, not me to Michigan, but me to the dark arts of pizza making. And I have since bought all the necessary equipment. You have given me more than enough instruction with respect to starting and recipes and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did do it this weekend. And so I've made 3 successfully. One that was ruined that...
Let's be clear. You made your own dough. You did
Made
your
everything.
own sauce. You grated your own cheese.
Yep.
You let everything ferment. You did all the needed steps. You made by far the best first pizzas I've ever seen.
Well,
way better than mine looked.
Yeah. Well, I had a good pizza coach here. Let's be real.
Sure.
And no, it turned out better than I expected.
You're like a coach's son, Ty. You're like, well, he's been doing this in the backyard for a while.
I've never been. I'm not that smart, but I can follow instructions pretty well. And so I followed your instructions, and I'm impressed by how it turned out. I have questions we need to talk about off
That's
the air.
fine.
But I compared it earlier to golfing. It's a little bit like golfing when you get the birdie. You can shoot like plus 1,000. It's the birdie that keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah, you have that one perfect bite, and you're like, ooh, I might be onto something here.
This has a golf quality to it.
I can't recommend it enough. It's relatively inexpensive, especially compared to what golf will end up costing you. And you make things with your hands. You make edible, if not delicious, end products. So, yeah, I've been recruiting you basically since freshman year, right?
Yeah.
It's been 3 years, and you finally broke down on signing day. I recruited your family, and they helped sway you, and here we are. You're going to be great. You're going to be a killer pizza maker. I know it.
This is going to be something else now that I'm going to obsess over. But
you have access to quality ingredients. I'm already looking at local mills for you in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
No, you're going to be great. You're going to be the most popular guy in your block. You're going to be hosting parties more than ever. You've got a good backyard. You got a nice little patio set up for hosting. So people are going to be watching you, and like, yeah, if you're good under pressure, which you claim to be, it's no problem.
Yeah.
But
I wasn't good.
I'm not uncles, and
I'm not as good when the stone is still spinning.
No,
when the stone is stationary, I seem to have the launch pretty much down pat.
You'll be great.
Yeah.
No, you are. I'm so proud, and this is tip of the iceberg, Ty. Tip of the spear, whatever it is. You're just getting started.
This unlocks something new in our relationship.
Oh yeah. But you're doing it with Kate too, right? Solid Wife Kate's going to be involved.
Solid Wife Kate has gotten involved.
See, I don't have that kind of collaboration here. So
yeah, this has been a collaborative effort over here.
Good for you. I'm so
All
excited.
Right. Look, that's it for today's show. Because
Yes.
the conversation, I felt like it was a good conversation. Because it ran a little bit long, we'll bump the rest of it to the Thursday episode. So make sure you come back for more. Hit subscribe, hit follow, leave a rating, a review. All that good stuff helps other people find the Verballerhood. If you're really into what we do, if you really want to help support what Dan and I do, you get access to bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, the Discord, all of what we've got planned here in the off season. Go to verballers.com, verballers.com. Fun chat, Dan.
Yeah.
We need to talk pizza. So on that note, yeah, stay solid.
Peace.